How did law enforcement know within hours of 911 being called that whoever committed these heinous crimes was no longer a threat to this community? Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk about something that has been on my mind since the Idaho 4 crimes first occurred. This is something that I've been thinking about since November 13th of 2022 last year. Now, the call to 911 came in at approximately noon. Now, just a few hours after that call came in, law enforcement was already assuring the community that there was no longer a danger to anyone in the community. So not only law enforcement was assuring the community that they were safe and that there was no longer a danger from these crimes, but the University of Idaho was also reiterating that there was no longer a danger to anyone in the community. Now at 3:07 p.m., just 3 hours after 911 was called, the University of Idaho issues a vandal alert to their students and faculty, basically making them aware of the situation and also issuing a shelter in place. So basically letting them know that stay inside. Now, only 39 minutes later, at 3:46, the University of Idaho issues another vandal alert. And in this vandal alert, they basically lift the shelter in place. So after only 39 minutes, they lift the shelter in place and basically tell their students and faculty that it's safe to go back out and walk around the campus. Just keep an eye out. Now, Washington State University issued a statement that the public was no longer in danger. The media was pushing the idea that, there was nobody in danger in this community. And the community wasn't buying it. A quadruple homicide had just occurred in one of the houses in their neighborhood. And these people weren't buying it. They weren't buying the idea that law enforcement did not have a suspect, but there was no danger to the community. Now, how would law enforcement be able to make this statement? How would law enforcement be able to make this statement unless they had eyes on the suspect or knew the whereabouts of whoever committed these crimes? How do you say we don't have a suspect, we don't have the weapon that was used, but the community is safe? This crime was isolated to this house. So law enforcement and investigators, along with the University of Idaho, is pushing this idea that they know that this is an isolated attack and it's a targeted attack. So basically it's personal to the individuals who live in this house and who were in this house that night. Nobody else outside of this house is in danger, is basically what they're saying. Now, how would they have known that this was a targeted attack towards these individuals? How would they have known that just hours after the 911 call came in? So when I heard this statement that the public was no longer in danger, immediately I began thinking a few things. Because when law enforcement comes out and informs the public that you're no longer in danger, usually what follows that up is a few different things. It could be that the suspect is deceased. It could be that the suspect is in the hospital, incapacitated. It could mean that they have a suspect in custody, or at least have eyes on this suspect. But without any suspect or any information, it seems odd to me that they would assure the public that they were no longer in danger. Now, law enforcement can say a lot of things that aren't true. But when they're addressing the public as far as their safety, I don't believe that they would mislead people. I don't believe that I think that if they believed that the public was in danger, I don't believe that they would mislead them and tell them that they were safe. Which definitely leads me to believe that there was an indication when they first entered this crime scene. There was some sort of indicator that let law enforcement know that these crimes were personal to these victims. That these crimes were contained within this house. Now, what could that indicator have been? Was there a message? Was there a message left? Maybe something written on the wall? Was it the way in which the bodies were positioned, or the manner in which their lives were taken? Were there certain things done to the bodies that would serve as an indicator for law enforcement? What could it possibly be that would indicate to law enforcement that these crimes were personal to only these victims? Law enforcement knew and felt confident that this was an isolated and targeted attack, and that the public was no longer in danger within hours of 911 being called. So there must have been a very clear indicator when they entered the crime scene that would tell them this. Now, as I'm hearing this, I'm also thinking, is it possible that they know the suspect's identity? Is it possible that they know who committed these crimes? But even if they knew who committed these crimes, unless they knew the whereabouts of these people, they would still be a danger to the community. Because now you don't have a suspect, you don't have the weapon, so now you have a psychotic suspect with a weapon in this community. Law enforcement would make it sound like, they were very calm about it and very nonchalant about it. And Steve Gonsalves is out there in the media and he's saying there is a psychotic individual out there taking people's lives. Watch your kids. Be aware. So while law enforcement is kind of downplaying this, like, it's okay. It's okay. Everyone's safe. The families are saying something totally different because they have some information about the extent of the injuries. So they know that this is a very dangerous person who was in this community and is possibly still in this community. Now, in the very beginning, the first few days, Ethan Chapin's dad does an interview, a news interview. And in this interview, he basically asks law enforcement to tell the truth. To tell the truth. Not find the truth. He urges law enforcement to tell the truth. What was that all about? What is the truth? You know, I always thought that statement was kind of strange, because why wouldn't law enforcement tell the truth? Why would Ethan Chapin's dad feel like he needs to urge law enforcement to tell the truth? I always thought that was kind of strange. But when I heard law enforcement talking about, that the public was safe, I started thinking maybe the suspect or whoever committed these crimes left something at the crime scene that would identify them. Not because this was just hours after 911 was called. So this was before the DNA, and this was before a lot of this discovery. So this was just hours after 911 was called that the media and the universities, Washington State University, the University of Idaho, and law enforcement were pushing this idea that whoever did this was not a threat to this community any longer. So I'm thinking, did this whoever committed these crimes, did they leave some sort of identifying indicator? Because it happens, as crazy as that sounds. So I'm going to make a video about this one day. This is just a side story, aside from the Idaho 4 story. But I knew a guy quite a while back. And he's been charged, and he's in federal prison right now doing his time for these crimes. But I knew a guy who was robbing banks, and he did this for a number of years without getting caught. And none of us knew that he was robbing banks. He had said that he got a inheritance, but he was robbing banks for a number of years. And you know how he got caught? He was running out of a bank that he had just robbed, and a construction worker who was cashing his paycheck grabbed his backpack. And when he grabbed his backpack, it became unzipped, and his wallet fell out of his backpack. He didn't know his wallet fell out, so he left the bank and he went home. And when he got home, law enforcement was waiting for him, because he was dumb enough to take his wallet into a bank robbery. So these things do happen. And that was something that was on my mind, as I was thinking, did whoever committed these Idaho 4 crimes leave some sort of identification? But even if whoever committed these crimes did leave some sort of identification, even if law enforcement knew who these people were or who this person was that committed these crimes, they still wouldn't know that the public was safe unless they knew where this suspect was at, unless they had eyes on this suspect. So how could they be so confident to tell the public and reassure the public? Now, as I said, was there a message left at the crime scene? Here's another possibility. Was there a witness? Is one of the surviving roommates, Bethany or Dylan, a witness to these crimes? Or did somebody escape? Did somebody get away from whoever committed these crimes and get away from the house? Was there more people in this house other than the 6 individuals who were reported to be in this house? Could there have been a 7th person in this house who was an eyewitness to these crimes? It's very possible that there's a witness out there that law enforcement has not informed us about. Because how would law enforcement know within hours that there was no longer a danger outside of this house? There would have had to be something very specific. So it's very possible that there could be a witness. We've heard about this informant. And, there's been a lot of theories about who this informant is. But it's very possible that maybe there was a witness in this house. Maybe somebody witnessed these crimes. I mean, I feel like somebody definitely witnessed these crimes. But maybe somebody came forward in the very beginning. Maybe there was somebody in this house who was also a potential victim. Maybe they were injured, but they got away. And maybe they're in the hospital. Because something had to happen. There had to be something that told investigators that there had to be something that told investigators that this was an isolated, targeted attack. Because they were very, very confident that there was that it was all over. There was no more danger. Whoever committed these crimes did what they needed to do and they were done. But I just don't understand how law enforcement would know that. Because they wouldn't have had the name of the suspect. We know now because they were asking for the public's help to identify this white Hyundai Elantra. They hadn't identified Brian Koberger within the first day that we know of. So it had to either be something that they found when they walked in the house that led them to believe without a doubt that this crime was personal to these victims, or there had to be a witness that we don't know about. There had to be a witness that we don't know about to tell law enforcement, and that's why law enforcement is so confident in their statement. Now, something else that also led me to believe that law enforcement, something that led me to believe that law enforcement was very confident about what they were looking at within this crime scene was 3 weeks later when we watched them load up the victim's belongings into a U-Haul truck and drive off from an active crime scene in a U-Haul full of the victim's belongings. That's strange. How often do you ever hear or see a news story about a police chief pulling up to an active crime scene in a U-Haul truck and loading potential evidence into this U-Haul truck? They're not tagging and bagging it. They're moving belongings into a U-Haul truck just as if they were moving out one of their buddies. How often do you hear about something like that? This was the first time I've ever heard of anything like that. Now, we know that they grabbed a few of the victims' belongings because they stated that they wanted to get these victims' belongings back to their family members because they felt like that would help them heal. Because we knew they weren't going to fit that whole 6-bedroom house in that little U-Haul truck. So is it possible that they did grab a few of the victim's personal belongings, but is it possible that they were really just moving Dylan and Bethany's things out of the house and out of the crime scene? Because Dylan and Bethany would have needed their things. All of their things were in the house. They lived there. So is it possible that that was law enforcement's way of going into the house and getting all of Dylan and Bethany's things out of the house? There's also the possibility that law enforcement thought that people might break into the house in order to try to steal, something from one of the victims, or, grab a souvenir from this house. These crimes are not just a national story. This is an international story. People from all over the world are following these crimes. So that's a possibility as well, but it shows a confidence in law enforcement that they know who did this. And at this time, they have not announced a suspect. So it's very strange to be moving evidence out of an active crime scene before you have a suspect. Now, of course, we know that, now they want to knock the house down on the 28th. In a week, the University of Idaho wants to knock this house down. Now, we know that some of the parents of some of the victims would like for that house to stay standing until after the trial, and that makes perfect sense. So, as I said in my videos, in a lot of previous videos, this is becoming a struggle between the victims' families and the University of Idaho. I've said it from the very beginning that this was going to be a struggle. This was going to be a struggle between the university and the victims' families. I've said that in many videos before this. It's about the money. It's about the money. To me, if the University of Idaho demolishes this house, that looks shady. That looks like they're trying to cover something up. I mean, they've been trying to sweep this under the rug since it happened. The University of Idaho will come out and tell the public, we'll do anything. We'll do anything that it takes to get justice for these victims. We'll do whatever it takes. But behind the scenes, they're moving out the furniture, and they've been trying to demolish this house since the beginning. Now there's a struggle between the University of Idaho and the families. I saw this coming a mile away. So I've just never really understood how law enforcement was so confident that whoever committed these crimes would not commit any more crimes within the community. How would they know that? And law enforcement and investigators, like I said, weren't the only ones pushing that narrative. The media was pushing it. University of Idaho, Washington State University, they're basically pushing this idea that whoever committed these crimes only wanted to hurt the people in this house. Now, the families understand that anyone who could commit these types of crimes is a very, very dangerous individual that you do not want within your community. So while law enforcement and investigators are being very nonchalant about it, and, it's okay. It's okay. The families of the victims are alerting people and saying there is a psychopath out there. Watch your kids. Pay close attention to your surroundings. There's somebody out there in the community that took 4 college students' lives with a sharp-edged blade. So I've just always thought that that was something that was important, because it just seems strange that without a suspect, that without having eyes, without seeing the person who committed these crimes, that you could assure the public that they were safe. So it's always made me wonder if there is somebody in the background, if there is somebody that they're hiding who was a witness, maybe an accomplice. I feel like there had to be somebody giving them information from the start, or else they just wouldn't have been able to be that confident in making that statement that the community was no longer in danger. I don't know. I'm going to keep looking into this because I do feel like this is very important, and this has been something that's been with me since day one. Stay tuned for my next video. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Rebecca Zahau case, and we're going to talk about the extent of her injuries and the manner, the very mysterious manner in which she lost her life. So stay tuned for that. Please like and, please subscribe to my channel if you like my content. I really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.